Okay, so guys, I think that we can start. Welcome again to our dynamic talks in our Gdansk office, and welcome everyone who joined us online. Today we will speak about data sanitization and web accessibility. But firstly, I want to give a virtual microphone to our location lead in Gdansk, Sergey Podonets.
Thanks, Elvina, taking the virtual microphone. Glad to see everybody online, and I also know that a number of people joined offline in our office. Let me share a couple of words about myself and about Grid Dynamics. So my name is Sergey Podonets, and I joined Grid Dynamics in 2014. Now I'm managing several accounts as a program manager, and also I'm a location lead for our Gdańsk location, which is quite recent in Poland. It was founded in 2021. In Poland, we have basically 4 locations. Biggest location is Kraków, established in 2014. Now it's around 400 people. Then we have Wrocław and Warsaw. By the way, I'm currently in Wrocław in a business trip, so that is why I'm online. In Poland, we have one of the strategic and key locations for Grid Dynamics, just because we have a strong centers of different excellence and expertise, and strategic growth of Grid Dynamics and expansion in Europe also based on Poland. Overall, company has a huge presence in different countries. We have a headquarters in San Francisco in Bay Area. In Europe, we have a headquarters in Switzerland. We expanded in India, and we purchased several companies in India just to support the huge growth there. This is because we have a strategy to cover all the time zones to serve our clients better. We work with the huge companies and start our history from PayPal, which was also known in 2006. Our company was founded by a couple from Kharkiv. When I joined, it was a size of 400. It was a small technology boutique, and we positioned ourselves as a boutique of seniors, where almost every engineer was a senior in our company. Now, in current scale, it's obviously impossible to have everybody senior, but we still pay a significant attention to keep the pace of high experience and strong expertise. So if you are in one of Grid Dynamics offices, that means you most likely will be surrounded by experienced engineers. The huge stride happened in 2020 when we went to IPO. By the way, we were the last company who went public right before the pandemic ruined whole the market, but we survived. As I mentioned, we purchased several technology companies, and we will continue doing that to expand our clients' portfolio and to support our growth. That's basically it about Grid Dynamics. And today we have a couple of presentations. We are a services business, which means we provide the services for our clients. We make different projects for them, but sometimes we also make the whole products. So one of the presentation would be about accessibility domain, and this domain is represented by a company who is our client. Basically, the team is located in Gdańsk, and we do the product for them related to accessibility testing. So I hope you will enjoy my presentations from our speakers, and happy to give the microphone to them. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sergey. And yes, I want to present our first speaker. It will be Aleksander Rediger with the presentation about data sanitization in web application. And I want to add that you can ask your questions after the presentation. If you are offline, you just need to raise your hand and ask a question. If you're online, you can ask the question in chat, or you can unmute yourself after the presentation and ask a question, and everyone will will hear you. And for the best question offline, we will have presents. So keep your attention. Thank you. And Alex, you can start.
Okay, thank you, Elvina. So, hi everyone, welcome to our office. Today I will present you a little bit about data sanitization in web applications, about why and how. So, at first, let me introduce myself. So, my name is Aleksander Rediger. I'm a UI software engineer in Grid Dynamics, currently working here for 1.5 years. And at the current moment, I'm working on e-commerce project for one of our big clients based in US. And yeah, let's move on to the agenda for today. So start, we'll talk just a bit about types of web attacks, just in general, and then we'll move more into cross-site scripting attacks, which are strictly connected with web applications, with front-end applications, basically. Next thing which we'll touch will be data sanitization in general. So we'll try to answer what does it actually mean? Why do we need to sanitize data? Later on, we'll compare input validation and input sanitization, because it's two different actually things that we need to keep in mind. And later on, we'll move to some examples for sanitizing data in JavaScript and in React and Angular. So we'll see what they can provide us in that matter. So types of web attacks. So in general, web attacks targets vulnerabilities in the websites to gain some unauthorized access, to obtain some confidential information, to gain access to some credentials, or introduce some malicious scripts, or just like alter web pages content. So let me ask you a question at the beginning. Do you know any type of web attacks? Can you name any of them? Have you heard about something?
This SQL injection.
Yeah, that's correct.
JavaScript script launch outside, but it was patched in local browsers.
Yeah, there is actually like a lot of them, and I will talk shortly about two of them and more in depth about cross-site scripting attacks. So at first, SQL injection. So it's web security vulnerability that allows an attacker to interfere with the queries that an application makes to a database. So it generally allows an attacker to to view data that they are normally not able to retrieve. So this might include data belonging to other users or any data that's actually the application have access to. So in many cases, attackers might take control and delete or modify some information, some files, and in the end causing some persistent changes to the application's behavior and the content that it presents. In the past years, there was few attacks with SQL injection. For example, in Turkey, the Turkish government had some harm when some group of hackers attacked their websites. But also there were some vulnerability reports from big companies such as Tesla, Cisco, or Epic Games with their Fortnite game. So they found out some vulnerabilities, which they later patched during like the security development. Okay, but let's move on to next type of attack. It's a directory traversal, also known as file path traversal. So it's also a web security vulnerability that allows an attacker to read arbitrary files that server is running in the application. So this might include application code and data, credentials for backend systems, and also some sensitive operating files. So when in some cases, attacker might be able to rewrite those files on the server, and this will allow them to like take full control of the server and do whatever they actually want. I haven't heard about some big cases when it comes to directory traversal, but I know there were some reports, for example, from Atlassian with the Jira Service Desk, or with Adobe with one of the projects that they actually had some vulnerabilities during their testing from the security team that they need to patch as well. Okay, but let's move on to cross-site scripting attacks, in short called XSS. So they are usually used to steal data or hijack browsing sessions, so the attackers can take actions on a victim's behalf. So hackers may use this opportunity to alter web pages, I don't know, post on social accounts, initiate some bank transfers, or make a fraudulent purchases. And yeah, in some cases, mostly like these attacks is accomplished by tricking application and websites into sending some malicious scripts through the web browser. And the most common method for taking over a user session is usually injecting code through form fields or any other data input fields. So like developers' best practices such as sanitizing and encoding are really crucial in this case to prevent such vulnerabilities. So let's jump on to types of cross-site scripting attacks. We can separate them for the server side and the client side. There are actually like 3 of them. So for server side, we have reflected, also called non-persistent XSS attacks. And this, in this case, malicious scripts are injected directly into HTTP request. And the script then is like reflected from the server in a HTTP response. So it's later executed in the user's browsers. And this is actually like the simplest type of XSS attack. Next one, called persistent or also stored, is actually like the most dangerous type of attack. It can actually affect every user who visits the site. So in this case, there is also scripts that are injected through formed fields, and the script is then later stored in the website's database indefinitely. So every user who then visits this attacked site will be, there is a potential that his session will be hijacked and that control will be taken by some hackers. And the last one is DOM-based XSS attacks. So this is the only one of the client side types. There is no requirement to connect with like the server side. So everything is running on the client side. So the like the vulnerability in the web application is like inserted in browser, and applications read the malicious script directly from a query string. And this is some kind like familiar to reflected types. Okay, but let me show you actually how such a DOM-based attack can be performed. So I got some little demo. Yeah, sorry for white background, but the dark one wouldn't be visible, I believe. So you can imagine that this is some kind of, I don't know, Google search engine, but made for Wayne Enterprise. So we want to find some data on our website about employees or whatever. And we are hackers, we are attackers, and we have spotted that actually the input field that is presented and the button that it's actually not sanitized, it's not validated, and there is an opportunity for us. So at first you might think to inject a script like that, and we'll try to, I don't know, maybe show some alert by doing so. And if we hit the search button, actually nothing will happen. Oh, and it's loading. I hope everything's fine with this one. Okay, so as you can see, we got in the URL at the top the script tag. However, nothing happened. In such a manner, we cannot like inject any script to the website from the outside. However, there are some tricks that we can use. And the simplest way to actually inject some code from outside is to use image tag with, for example, blank source. And then we can call on error function from window global objects, inside which we can call, for example, an alert. So it would be look like this. And if we hit enter, you can see that we actually activated the alert. the prompt, the code from outside of our like code base was injected and is available. And yeah, you might think, oh, what's the problem? Nothing really special right there. However, like I'm not as smart as the hackers are. They can get access to some cookies from our browser, in which inside they can find session ID, for example, and get access to some accounts or some websites where we are logged in. And then they can perform some actions on our behalf and get some credentials and other personal informations. Okay, but let's go back to the presentation. So data sanitization, what does it actually mean? So in general, data sanitization involves purposely, permanently deleting or destroying data from a storage device and to ensure that it cannot be recovered. So when data is deleted from storage media, actually the media is not really erased. And when the attacker gets access to the device, he can still receive some data from it. So this raises serious concerns when it comes to security and data privacy. So with sanitization, storage media will be cleansed and there is like no leftover data on the device, and no data can be then actually recovered with some advanced forensic tools. And in general, shortly, let's speak about data sanitization techniques. So there are three, I prepared three of them. So the simplest one, which we'll start, is like physical destruction, right? So there are like two approaches with physical destruction. We can use industrial shredders to break device into pieces, or we can use the gaussers, which will expose device to a strong magnetic field, and irreversibly they will erase any data on the hard drives or on some kind of tapes. Next one is cryptographic erasure. So when it comes to cryptographic erasure, we are using a public key cryptography with a strong key of at least 128 bits to encrypt all the data on the device. And without the key, the data cannot be decrypted and becomes unrecoverable. So at the end of the whole process, the private key is discarded and data is effectively like erased from the device. And the last one, data masking, it's widely used technique in compliance strategies and is explicitly required by some compliance standards. So masking in general just involves creating the versions of the like fake versions of the data that we have in the application. So for example, let's say that we have some data about our customers' names, phone numbers, email addresses, and so on, and we are just relating the data that looks exactly like a real one, but it's faked in this case. So do you already know why we need to sanitize data based on what you heard so far? In general, like data sanitization is essential because it protects your company's data, it mitigates your risk in disposing of unwanted assets, and it ensures data compliance and security at all times. So despite of all our investments in some advanced tools for security, the code base usually is like the weakest link for any organization's cybersecurity. So sanitizing and validating inputs is usually like the first layer of defense. So that's why developers must keep in mind that sanitizing and validating data correctly is necessary before making any transactions or saving any entries in a databases. And now let's shortly talk about input validation and input sanitization. So when it comes to validation, we need to keep in mind that it's like running a test about the data that the user is filling out in a form. So for example, if there is some email field, we may want to make sure that it's not empty, that it follows a specific email pattern. And on the other hand, if the form has a name field, we want to make sure that it's also not empty, that it's string, that it's has some minimum length requirements. And When it comes to sanitization, it's actually like cleansing the original data to prevent it from exploiting any security holes in our application. It is actually like the process of preparing data to be sent to the database and ensuring it is safe to be entered. And it may include like the elimination of unwanted characters from inputs by means of removing, replacing, encoding, or escaping the character. Okay, so let's move on to data sanitization in JavaScript, like in vanilla. So based on what we heard and how the like DOM-based attack, XSS DOM-based attacks works, we can think of some writing by ourselves, some really simple function. So here is just a like really simple example of so-called sanitize function that we created by extending string prototype. And we are replacing here actually like only 3 symbols that feels for us like suspicious and not needed at all. So it's like ampersand, lower than, greater than. And later on, we can use it in some other function for rendering the data, where we provide some objects that have some data from inputs for ID, URL, name, and price. And on these variables, we can use our sanitize function to replace those characters if they appear. So we later can inject them to the DOM safely. The next one is content security policy, in code short CSP. So the HTTP content security policy response header allows website administrators to control the resources the user agent is allowed to load for a given page. So policies mostly involve specifying server's origin and script endpoints. And although it's like primarily used as HTTP response header, we can also apply it via a meta tag. So as you can see on the slide in the picture below, we have something called content. And inside of it, we have set 3 fetch directives. First one is default SRC, which serves us as a fallback for other fetch directives. We also got EMG SRC, which like specifies valid sources of images and favicons that we would like to load. And also there is child SRC, which validates sources for web workers, and nested browsing contexts, which we load using elements such as frame and iframe. And just shortly, like CSP is supported like for a long time by all the major modern browsers. It's not only supporting Internet Explorer, but there is no surprise to that nowadays. So we are safely to use it. And quick example of an error which we could that could appear when someone tried to load some script from the source different than the provided by the administrator in this case. So as you can see, we had our default source set to APIs Google.com, and the script that was someone tried to load was from different directive. So we can see something like this in response in the console. And now let's move on to libraries. There are few of them available online to help us sanitize data in our application. However, the most popular one is actually DOM Purify. So I hope you can see somehow the lower part of the picture. And so in just shortly, we got a variable dirty inside of which there is a string, there's image tag with source and onload function. So there is another approach for the XSS attack. So we provided the source of the image, and then we try to trigger onload function to do some malicious things. And also there is a script tag with something inside. When we provide it to the DOM Purify sanitize function, you can see that the end product of this in the like this clean variable will be we have just I love to do evil, and the image with the source onload functions, scripts, and everything else is removed. Okay, now let's move on to data sanitization in React. So luckily React does a few things under the hood to safeguard our application against XSS attacks. And first one is actually like the error which will React throw to us when we try to use inner HTML element property. So React knows that this is actually not safe, and we need to be really careful if we try to implement something with the inner HTML. In this case, it will show us a warning, an error in the console that if we really need this approach in our business logic, we need to use dangerously set inner HTML. And as we can imagine, it was named so for a reason. And next, we got some example of a React application, a simple one. So here we've got an input element with a button that fires a validate message function. We have created a state validation message that is set inside the validate message function using a set timeout. And finally, we output this validate message in a div element using JSX. So React outputs elements and data inside them using auto escaping, and it interprets everything inside validation message as a string and does not render any additional HTML elements. So this means that if validation message is somehow infiltrated by a hacker with some, let's say, script tags or image tags, React would simply ignore it and render it as a string. And to demonstrate this, we made a little change in our validate message function. So we inserted some script tag, and after hitting the submit button, we can see that it's actually printed as a string, not as a new DOM element. Okay, now data sanitization in Angular. So Angular also have some built-in tools ready for us that we can use to sanitize data. And first of all, we'd like to touch and talk about DOM Sanitizer API, which help us prevent cross-site scripting bugs by sanitizing value to be safe to use in different DOM contexts. It gives us more control with its methods that it provides over our sanitization in the application. And strictly with this DOM sanitizer, they are strictly connected to the trusted values, something that we have in the Angular. So to systematically block some XSS bugs, Angular treats all the values as untrusted by default. So when a value is inserted into a DOM from a template binding or interpolation, Angular sanitizes and escapes all the untrusted values. So if value was already sanitized somewhere outside of the Angular, we can actually tell this to Angular that this value is considered safe, and we are able to use it with some of the following methods that you can see on the slide. And here is an example. So imagine that the following template needs to bind the URL to a JavaScript alert call. So we have some p tags with anchor elements with href, that one is dangerous and one is trusted. And normally Angular automatically sanitizes the URL, disables the dangerous code, and in development mode logs this action to the console. So to prevent this, we can mark our dangerous URL that we know that is safe. So we can use the sanitizer with bypass security trust URL call. And by doing so, when we click on the button under the trusted URL, you can see that the prompt appears and everything works fine. Otherwise, it would be just rejected. And here the next example, the following template binds the value of HTML snippet, once by interpolating it into an element content, and once by binding it into an inner HTML property of an element. So interpolated content is always escaped. The HTML isn't interpreted, and the browser displays angle brackets in the element's text content. So for the HTML to be interpreted, we need to bind it to an HTML property such as inner HTML in this case. And we need to remember that binding a value causes some vulnerabilities. So we might be attacked with the XSS approach. So for example, when we run such a JavaScript code in following way, Angular recognizes the value as unsafe and automatically sanitizes, which removes like the script element, but keeps the safe content as the B text. So the result of this will be just template syntax, and the script and everything that is inside of it will be simply removed. So just to summarize everything, lurking threats in the web, there is like a lot of them actually. There's like, I don't know, 50, 60 types of attacks. Even some really clever ones with some artificial intelligence. And we need to remember that cyber attacks are opportunistic where hackers are spotting vulnerabilities in the application defense and to try to exploit them. So data sanitization is really important in that matter. It cleans the original data to prevent it from exploiting any security holes in our application. When it comes to validation, we need to remember that it's a process of ensuring that the input data falls within the expected domain of valid program input, and sanitization is a process of ensuring that the data conforms to the requirements of the subsystem to which it is passed. And to sanitize data in our web application, we can use some external libraries, such as Don't Purify, for example. And when it comes to frameworks in general, they have some built-in tools to help us prevent such an attacks and vulnerabilities. So yes, that would be it from my side. Thank you for listening, and I guess it's time for some questions if you do so. So be free to ask if anything appears in your mind.
So Alex, is there any reason to not sanitize your data?
To know sanitize data, I think you are playing some really
Maybe
dangerous
like
game.
performance or something.
No, I mean, there is like no reason to not implement sanitization. I mean, it's really important. And like when it comes to web applications, the front end is like the first layer of defense. And it's important to have like a sanitization also on the backend servers and so on. So yeah, I believe there is like no reason not to sanitize. It's really crucial. And yeah, to just avoid some suspicious things that can happen or occur during, I don't know, the living product, right? So
yeah, thank you.
Maybe someone from online have some questions. Okay, I think no. So Alex, you can make a present to one person who asked you a question from our merge.
sure.
Okay.
So, I guess thank you for the attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I will ask Maksym to join us. Okay, so the next speaker is Maksym Pidobid with his presentation about web accessibility. Maksym, you can start.
Hi all. My name is Maksym Pidobid. I'm a front-end developer in Green Dynamics and currently developing the tools that improve accessibility on the front end. This is where the idea came from to tell you about this topic. So today I will tell you basic things like what the accessibility is, why do we need it, and for whom, so that we'll all have we all have the same understanding of what will be discussed today, as well as some laws in different countries that regulate the accessibility topic. After that, we will dive into web accessibility standards and analyze a couple of examples from the documentation. In the end, I will talk about voice recognition technologies and screen readers. And since we are talking about voice technologies, this is web speech API. And then we will have a short Q&A section. So let's begin. What exactly is accessibility? Accessibility is about providing the ability to use your site in every way, not only using mouse and keyboard. Ideally, by all people on the planet, but the goal is to ensure that as many people as possible can use your site in every way. Who does it help? Of course, the first thing that comes to the mind is people with permanent disabilities, poor eyesight, impaired motor skills, or short-term memory problems. Also, there are also people with temporary disabilities, like a broken arm. More, it helps people with disabilities due to circumstances, a driver behind the wheel, and of course, the average user. It works in such a way that if we start dealing with the accessibility for people with disabilities, you automatically get an improvement of UX for people, for average users. Today, I will show you some examples what I'm talking about. But why do we need it? There are many reasons to be found here, and several of them coming together can convince you to convince you or the business that it's time to think about accessibility on your project. And as I write on the slide, there's at least six reasons. Legal, ethical, reputational, expanding the reach of the users, material, and innovative. But before I go, no, I think it's clear what each of the reasons means. On the legal side, I will pay a little more attention, since this reason can create problems for your company in the short term. We will not deep dive into this topic, but we will go through the tops. In general, laws on accessibility can be divided into three groups: on the civil rights of people with disabilities, on public procurement, and as for individual sectors and industries. Most of these laws have been provided into United States and Europe, and have been for a long time. In other countries like Australia, Canada, or Britain, such laws also have been provided and are in effect. Of course, this is not a complete list of laws. I mentioned only the most famous. Let's get back to the main topic. With the basic concepts of accessibility, we figured out. Let's go to the specifics, in particular for web accessibility. The W3C once formed the 4 principles of web accessibility. The interface must be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. But before we go to these principles, I will ask you a question. What do we, as front-end developers, always do when creating the websites, without even thinking that's directly affect accessibility? Your ideas?
Contrasting colors for you?
That's actually from the design part, but yeah, other ideas?
Using semantic tokens instead of this everywhere.
Can you repeat?
Using semantic tokens instead of this everywhere.
That's two, but I think about different, so something different. Okay, there's no more ideas. This is responsive web design. We're creating the site, the version of the site for mobile. Okay, let's briefly go over these principles to remember them. Perceivable. The interface can be perceived by different senses, for example, eyes, ears, or skin. Operable. We can control the interface not only using standard input methods like a keyboard or mouse, but only using the keyboard or even by voice. Understandable. Everything is clear here. The interface is easy to navigate and the content is written in the understandable way. And robust. Everything is simple here too. The interface must be stable and work on different devices, from computers to phones. This is exactly where the responsive web design applies to. Of course, after the creation of these principles, the great WCAG was created. What is it? WCAG is a list of guidelines for creating websites that will be accessible for people with different disabilities. In fact, it's important, if not to name it, the main document around web accessibility. There are several versions of these documents, but most of them are outdated or presented only as a draft. So the current version is 2.1, and that's what we will talk about today. Well, here is a screenshot of what this documentation looks like. On the left side, we can find a quick menu with all documentation items. Each of the items is a separated guideline to create site more accessible. Now I will show you some examples. This is what the color contrast looks like. And the problem is with text contrast. I think it's visible. In this documentation, we have 2 guidelines for minimum and for enhanced color contrast, which differ from each other only by contrast ratios. You can find detailed information about all the criteria in the documentation. Now it would be not interested to analyze it. Okay, what are the other guidelines do we have? Target size is a simple guideline that is easy to remember. The minimum size of element or a button is 24 by 24 pixels. The enhanced size of element, 44 by 44 pixels. You can see one exception of this rule on the second from the bottom example. but I just recommend you to remember to use 24 by 24 pixels. It's easier to remember and to implement. And as we can see, the cursor may fit on the button in less than 24 pixels size, but the finger is definitely not. And we go to the last example of the guideline. Text spacing is another easy to understand guideline. The more spacing we have in the text, the easier is it to read. I think it's the difference between these examples are really can be clearly seen by the eye. Again, you can find all the requirements in the documentation. And as I said, there are 3 guidelines which help the average user, not only the users with disabilities. Okay, WCAG, that's cool, but what else? Of course, there are more large documentation with slightly different goals, but somehow fixing the accessibility. They're authoring tools accessibility guidelines for creating tools that will be more accessible. The next one is user agent accessibility guidelines. Are guidelines for creating accessible user agents such as browser or media players. And finally, the APG, or ARIA Authoring Practices Guide. It's a list of guidelines and recommendation for using ARIA to create accessible web content. And web content meaning not only the button, not only the text, but for example, buttons or the interface. Today, I will tell you only about APG. We will not touch only other mentioned guidelines here. This is how the main page looks like. A little less formal than WCAG, but no less informative. What is in this documentation? Actually, the main 2 branches are list of UI patterns, how they look like, are made, and other useful information. And the second is general practices, how to improve accessibility on your site. But before we move on to the pattern examples, there is one more rule that appears on every main page on this documentation. No ARIA is better than bad ARIA. Why? So functionally, ARIA roles, states, and properties are analogous to a CSS for assistive technologies. Just try to load site without CSS. You will understand how important it is. With this figured out, let's quickly run through 2 examples and start with a simple one. Button. Here we can find a lot of different technical data. But the most important thing for us as developers, interactive examples and of course code. Well, on the right, you can see an example of some technical data. As they are presented on the page, in principle, there is nothing special to show more. Let's go next. The image carousel is already a complex pattern with much more technical data, but different set of categories. And in general, this is roles, states, properties, interactive examples, and code. Well, speaking of patterns, that's all for now. There are more of them, but you can find everything that you need. Just Google APG accessibility. You'll find everything. And finally, probably the easiest topic to understand for today, as I think, Web Speech API. There are 2 models here. This is speech recognition and speech synthesis mechanism, text-to-speech. With the first, everything is clear. We speak into the microphone and the technology creates the word that we speak. With the second, the technology reads the text that is present on the site in a voice. But I will make one reservation. The technology itself does it, but today we will talk about technology with a slightly different and wider scope, screen readers. The basics are simple. Let's start with speech recognition. It is useful, for example, if you're driving a car and want to write an urgent message. We cannot just stop. This is where the technology can help us. We can just keep driving and dictate a message. It's simple. And of course, this is a must-have technology for people with disabilities. But not only we can enter the text, there are also always comments that provide ability to use the site as if we were using a mouse or keyboard. So we can not only dictate a message, we can send it by voice. Let me show you some examples of these devices, commands. Scroll down, click link, go back, zoom in, open menu, increase volume, search for, select, submit, cancel, go to next field. There is really a lot of commands. Each browser and program, the operating system, has its own set of the voice commands. I cannot provide you with a complete list of them, but you can find everything that you want in every of the program and operating system. And of course, there are problems too. Here are some of them. Pronunciation. When the people with impaired speech apparatus, or for example, just people with an accent speak, voice recognition not always able to understand what they are saying. Languages, when creating, there is a problem in another scope. When creating technology, you need to remember that the final text may contain fragments not only in one languages, but in different languages. And voice commands must support a lot of different languages. And of course, noise or bad microphone. The more interference, the final sound of speech, the more difficult is it to technology to understand what are you saying. Okay, we figured out with speech recognition. Let's move on to the second model, screen readers. Screen readers are a second model in the web speech API scope. Whom is it created? For people with permanent disabilities, in particular for blind people. And just as I said, it's created for people with disabilities due to circumstances, diver, for example. And of course, for people like me to quickly voice integration with ChatGPT. By the way, the screen readers not only read the text on the screen and the voice, there are devices that turn the text into the Braille, and the screen readers is responsible to recognize and sending this data to such a device. Here is an example of device. The tablet uses a pneumatic system, tiny liquid or air-filled bubbles that inflate or deflate to form Braille letters. Such a device is much cheaper than its counterparts from the past. Well, screen readers are not without problem too. Two of them, bad indexing navigation elements, or again, languages. With the navigation elements indexing, there is everything simple. When we do not set it or set it poorly, screen readers just give you the meaningless text for the navigation elements. With languages, the problem looks worse. Screen readers do not work well with multiple languages on the page, in one text, of course, even if we put the HTML markup correctly. Of course, you can find more problems and their solutions in WCAG. In principle, we figured out the web speech API. In the end, I have one bonus fact for you that make you think. In 2011, a report by the World Health Organization was released that there are about 1 billion people with disabilities in the world, or 15% of the total population of Earth. 1 billion. Just think. Let's summarize what we learned today, and we will finish. Accessibility is beneficial for all users. Web accessibility principles. The interface must be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. WCAG 2.1, guidelines that will solve almost all accessibility problems. APG, documentation, list of popular UI patterns with accessibility. And web speech API, useful and very important topic in terms of accessibility. So that's all for today. Do you have any questions to me?
Maybe
Okay.
someone from online also have questions?
Sorry.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a tester and I want to ask if there are any like basic parts or things that I can test in accessibility, because I realized this accessibility is like very complex thing, but are there any like basic stuff that I can do to test? Not to go into deep details?
You're a tester, but what are you testing? It's a React application or sites? Maybe
Well,
simple.
web application.
Okay. For web application, currently I'm developing the tool to test web applications for a client. And yeah, you have, I don't know, can I name it, but you can find an applications to test applications for mobile, for web applications, for site. I think if you Google it, you can find some examples of these applications. So actually, that's it.
Mateusz, is it the answer for your question?
Yeah, I mean, if you know, I thought about manual testing, but if you propose tools to do it, then okay, yeah, I understand it.
And no tools for manually testing the web applications, but I know some tools to manually test the web, mobile applications. So here I think I cannot help you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Alexander, great presentations. Thank you very much. And I think this kind of accessibility should be standard for at least for government websites. I know it for sure. Unfortunately, it's not reality, but that should be at least for government websites. It should be standard.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, everyone. I have a question.
Mhm.
Firstly, thank you for the presentation. It's really interesting and informative. And my question is, we are talking about some legal stuff around accessibility, and I want to understand, like, for example, I'm developing some website for Europe market, and did they check my website somehow if is it like accessible, or I gonna have problems just at the moment when somebody will complain that it's not accessible?
I don't really understand your question. It's about when we want to do accessibility, right?
No, I mean, like, for example, I'm deploying some website for Europe, and like, when will I get in trouble if it's not accessible? When somebody will complain about it, or maybe there is some standard checking from like government or something?
Okay. Actually, in some countries and in Europe in particular, we have some laws about it. But as I know, as you said, it's mainly for the government sector. But I don't know what is the department in government check the accessibility of your site. But I think if you sign the contract with the government, in this contract, one of the point is the product must be accessible, and before you take it to the before you realize it and take it to the client, the government check it. I think in this way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think that's it. We don't have questions from online, and I think from offline too, yes?
Yeah. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Maksym. Thank you, guys, who joined us online and offline also. In our office, you will have some treats. For online, I want to say thank you and have a nice evening.